And we're live.
Hi. Hi, Victoria. Welcome to our show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Right. So I was fortunate enough to meet you at Social Media Marketing World.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I heard about
San
your
Diego.
outstanding reputation as a podcast
Oh.
booking agency founder. That's what it
Okay.
says on your LinkedIn. So that's what I put down in the corner there.
Thank you very much.
So can we start off with the obvious question? Like, what kind of things do you do as a podcast booking agency founder? And
okay.
like what? Yeah, well, let's start with that. How did you get into it, and what do you do currently?
Okay, so I'm trying to think where to begin. So originally I trained in journalism. I'll keep it shortish, but originally I trained in journalism, and then I moved into communications and marketing. For a while I worked for universities on the whole, and then I kind of branched out into helping authors and small businesses. And a few years ago, I was doing a course to update my skills. I was working with some authors, and one of the strategies that they talked about as being really good was podcast interviews. And as part of that course, they had a Facebook group as well for members, and somebody posted in there, I would really like to get booked on podcast interviews, but I'm running a business and I don't have time to do it myself. Does anyone know of anyone who could help? So I said, I can. So that was the first. That's the way it began anyway. And it worked so well with him. And I had another couple of clients. So I said, how about we add this to your marketing mix? So that was something that we did, and it grew from there.
Wow. So did you have experience doing your own podcasts prior to this?
No, absolutely not.
This was marketing, a total marketing.
Yeah, absolutely. So he did. So the first client that I had, he had been on a couple of shows before. He had his own podcast, and he was a speaker as well at conferences. So what he wanted me to do was pitch him and book him basically on relevant podcasts.
That's brilliant.
Okay.
So what did you want me to talk about what we actually say, what we do?
Yes, please.
If you like. Yeah. So often people will come to us because like him, they're short of time. You know, you've got maybe a job and you want to add podcast interviews to your content marketing mix. So when we start working with a client, the first place we start is looking at the goals and who are the target audiences from them, because obviously that's going to affect the shows that we pitch to and book them on. We've got relationships with some podcast hosts already, but if we don't, then we research shows and then we pitch to them. We also put together interactive PDFs for our clients, which have their biography, suggested topics or questions that they can talk about, and all their details, which helps with the pitch. And we advise them on the strategy of being a guest, where they're going to send people at the end of the show, how they're going to see their return on investment, that kind of thing. And we review results with them and book them, brief them for the shows to cut down the time that they have to prepare. Follow up with the hosts afterwards, follow up with the clients, see how it all went. And if we're working, sometimes we work with a repurposing agency to turn podcast interviews into blog posts and social media posts, that kind of thing. So we will liaise with the hosts to get the files and the permissions and things like that. So that's kind of in a nutshell.
Yeah. So what are the, let's say somebody's watching this show and they're not quite at the point of, I think, well, I've got enough time to do a bit of this myself. What have you learned are some of the biggest pitfalls that people make when they're trying to pitch to appear on podcasts or shows?
Okay. Firstly, not researching the show properly, not taking the time to listen to it. You know, you really want to make sure, for example, that they have guests before you pitch. It's worth spending time on the pitch. Don't send out a templated pitch. I don't know if you've ever received them, but you know, when it's really clear that someone's never even listened to your show, no idea maybe who you are, dear Bob, you know, that kind of thing, and then talks about just how great they are and why you should have them on the show. But so we always say to people that if you're going to pitch, listen to the show first. Make sure that you know there's something that you connect with the host, with the show, and then put that in the pitch. Let them know what you liked about the show. If you can't find anything that you connected with, it's probably not the right show for you anyway. So move on and find another one. If you like the show, leave a review or leave 5 stars and let the host know that you've done that. Also, let the host know that you understand who their audience is. And you can do that by looking at the descriptions, by reading some of the reviews, maybe on iTunes, looking if they've got a Facebook page, kind of seeing the comments, the interactions. And then let the host know in your pitch that you understand who they're talking to. Then where you think you can add value to the show, just a few bullet points of what you can talk about, maybe a couple of lines about you, who you are, why you're qualified, to sort of help, and then what you'll do to help them spread the word of the show. So that you'll share it with your email list if you've got one, or on your social media platforms, so that it's not just about taking, it's about giving. What can you do for the host as well, so it's mutually beneficial.
So, question about the booking agency and what you do specifically for your clients. I'm assuming you have lists of certain kinds of podcasts will work better with certain kinds of clients, depending on subject matter and that kind of thing. How do you go about kind of separating one from the other, and where you put each client?
Sure. So usually our clients have a good idea of who their audience is already. If they're authors, you've already given quite a lot of thought to this. So say for authors, for example, say you've written a book. So we might start by saying, okay, so if your book's on a shelf, which other books are sitting next to it? Who is in the same genre? And you can then have a look on the internet for that author. If you searched their name with the word podcast, you're going to get a list of podcasts that you can target audience. We come from who is the target audience, and then who is the target audience of the podcast. It's not always that straightforward, in that sometimes there's an overlap of audiences, so it might be a show where you think, so for example, we've got a career coach has a client, and she said that she knows that although her time sort of up leveling their careers, those women also might be into yoga, or they might have a personal stylist. So you can go a little bit broader. It's just looking for the overlap as well.
So what kind of advice do you give to your, given that you're doing it at the moment, to people who are appearing on podcasts? I mean, I presume, if I was being nitpicky about it, podcasts are kind of like generally more audio format, but I presume you also do video shows and YouTube interviews and every other kind of media that you can think of as well.
Yes.
What's your advice in terms of people to get people appearing guests, and like maybe they're nervous about it? What kind of advice do you give for people appearing as a guest on a show?
Okay, so if they're nervous, one of the ways that we find can help is if you feel like you know your topic. So as I mentioned, we put together this one sheet, a PDF with looking at topics and questions that you can talk about. For some people, it's really helpful to write them out, to feel that you know your subject, to know what you're talking about. Some hosts will give the advanced questions as well, which can help with nerves. But it's good to know if you can be prepared. So you know if it's live, or you know if it's pre-recorded or edited. All those things can sort of help with your nerves, but also remembering that when you're being interviewed on a podcast or a show, it's actually a one-on-one conversation, and you do those every day, and you know your subject because it's what you do. So if you try to just focus on having that conversation and talking about what you know, not who is going to listen or who else is listening, that can really help.
This is on a personal note for our show, we've had quite a few people actually ask for a script ahead of time, and we don't do that. Is that common at all?
I'd say it's probably 50-50. I even have, sometimes we'll get questions in for clients and it will be we'll just use this as the basis of the discussion. So it might give some guidelines, but they'll follow the conversation, which can lead to a better interview if it's, sort of following where it goes. It's about 50-50 on if people give questions or not. Or some hosts, might just have 1 or 2 questions that they always ask.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's where having watched the show is useful, or listened to the show is
Yes,
useful, because if they always ask the
absolutely.
same question,
Yes.
or the
Like
similar questions.
What is
then,
Tim? Your 2 questions are about an animal and
Well, I don't ask them every week. I've stopped asking. I have got 2 common questions I ask, which are a bit bizarre.
Oh my gosh,
This-
I don't think I picked that up. I listened to your interview with Christine Gritman.
Yeah. Oh, well, no, I think I asked.
Did you
Well,
ask her?
let me. Yeah, well, I know I asked one of them, so I'll ask the same question I did in that one to you, which is, let's say that Christelle, this
Yes.
over here.
Oh, the llama question. Yeah.
Oh,
Yes,
I did
she,
hear about the llama farm.
Yeah, she
llama
for
farm.
some reason is starting a llama farm, and she wants more attention.
Really cool.
So he hires you as a client to promote, to help her promote a llama farm. So take us through what the process would be, because
well, so
she might
first
not
of
know what
all,
audience is. Yeah.
yeah. So first of all, this llama farm is. Are you going to have any services that people can access from all over the world? Do you have a course on llamas, on looking after them, or are they going to have to come to San Diego to your farm? Because podcast interviews are going to work best if you for a global audience.
I see. I think we're going to offer yoga and llamas for mamas.
Okay.
It can be on. Let's say it's online.
This is
brilliant.
Therapy or whatever.
Brilliant. This sounds so fun. It sounds really good. Okay, so firstly, we're going to look at who are your clients. Who is it that you want to talk to? What are your goals? And then we're going to look at which podcast might be a match. We'll also ask you if there's any that you listen to that you think would be really good to be on, that you're already aware of, or any kind of shows that would be an absolute no for you. I'm sure no shows that hate llamas, that kind of thing. We're going to go through that first, and then we're going to pitch to you. And I think that we need to talk about what you want to talk about on these interviews. So depending on what your goals are, what kind of questions are going to help you reach those goals with your answers. So if it's getting people to come to your sessions, maybe we can talk about the benefits of these llama yoga sessions, or that kind of thing, so that if hosts then do ask you about that, you can demonstrate how fabulous it all is and you can talk about it. And another key thing we need to think about is where you're going to send them to connect with you at the end. Do you have a llama newsletter, something, or a Facebook page or something to get them into your community, so that when they've heard you that first time, you've got to then nurture them if they're not quite ready to come along, somewhere where they can keep hearing about you. Maybe you're going to be sharing how fab your last sessions were, and till you can get them over the finish line.
So in this case, would we focus more on selling what I'm offering, or would we also focus on telling a story of some sort?
Absolutely. But so during the interview, so the call to action part that I was talking about, that's going to come at the end. We want to share stories, or your how you got into the llama farm and the yoga, maybe your business journey, anything that you've learned, because shows have different formats. So there's going to be lots of different facets that we can use and come at it from a different angle, maybe the business angle, the animal care angle, health benefits of these things. You might be able to get into some health shows. And yeah, if you could put together some really interesting stories from that you can share and you can add value. Any tips maybe on doing yoga with llamas, or llama care that or those kind of stories to share, so that we're going to be adding value on the podcast interviews rather than selling, because selling is just to know the way through.
Absolutely. Yes.
Yeah. So my understanding, and I might be wrong here, is that you also do it the other way around. So let's say that we were trying to find guests for this show. Is that something that you also provide service to hosts? Or
we do for a couple of clients. We do. It came that we used to focus on the way I've talked about, but then we had a couple of clients saying, do you know what, actually I've got my own show, would you help me find some guests?
Okay.
So yeah, we do.
Yeah.
We do.
So, well, I mean, I know personally the challenges of both sides actually, but what are your, let's say that, well, Christelle gave up on, she'd been on all of the podcasts locally, all the San Diego Llama podcasts and all the rest of it in San Diego. And then she starts her own Llama show. What advice would you give her in terms of finding guests for that show? And like, is there, I mean, one of the things I think over the years, is there like a level of guests that she should go for and then start building up? Or should she be aiming for the best, like the world Llama expert or something?
So I would say it kind of depends. Do you have, do you know some of the leading experts? There's so many different approaches. I don't know. Have you know Teresa Heath Waring? So when I spoke to her about her podcast, I don't know if she shared this with you, but she landed 2 really big guests when she started her podcast. I think Amy Porterfield and Pat Flynn. And I hope I get this right. I believe she went to an event or something with Pat Flynn, and then she followed up with a video message inviting him out for coffee. So she tried to make those connections, those personal connections. So I don't think they were there, but she made them. And as a result of just connecting with them and getting on well with them, they offered to be on her show. So you could try that as a strategy. You could just reach out with a video messages. I think faces are harder to say no to sometimes. You could start with people in your network. It depends how confident you feel as well as an interviewer. Do you want to get, practice with people you're comfortable with first and kind of get into the swing of it? Or are you really confident, you're ready to go, you're like, I can handle an interview with the top Llama expert?
Well, and it goes the opposite way. I was going to ask you a similar question. For those who are just realizing they need to make media appearances, podcast appearances, live show appearances, do you have shows that you might advise them to go to for practice before they reach for some of the bigger podcasts?
Well, we have our own podcast that we run, and that's partly that reason. So our clients can come on and we can have a run through if they want. So we do it at different stages. If they're quite confident, that's something we'll do later. But if it's not, we'll interview them and give them that practice first. And yes, I think it depends where you are as well. How big's your audience? Where you kind of start. And I think sometimes how attractive you are to hosts. So if you're coming right at the beginning and you don't have a lot of experience, you don't have a big audience, you're kind of in a growing stage, but you want to get started, start with the smaller shows. You can still be strategic. If it's something you're terrified about and you're just thinking, I just need to do something, then maybe do 6 shows just to get practice, and don't worry too much about what they are before you start kind of honing the strategy and picking the shows that are going to help you.
We have a comment from Jay Osborne. Telling your business story is a good tip, and loving the Llama Farm discussion. So need to get back into doing the Llama Farm question more often.
I like that.
About that. Jenny, I'm wondering if you've pitched yourself on any podcast. Jenny's been on our show, by the way. And she had her own podcast, so I can see,
experienced.
Exactly.
So, how effective do you think podcasts are for a company and for a business relative to I mean, obviously, you're slightly going to be biased.
I'm going to be biased in this, aren't I?
Yeah.
You know what I'm going to say.
How effective is it as a way of?
It's really effective. It's really effective. To add podcast interviews as part of your content marketing strategy. So our clients all have different goals. For example, and I think the goal part is really important when you're starting off. You need to know what you're trying to achieve before you just kind of do willy-nilly interviews. That's why we talk about who the audience is. But we have one client, for example, and one of his aims is to enroll people in their affiliate program, health and wellness business. And so the connections actually that they make with the hosts are really important. They've signed up so many hosts to be their affiliates just through connecting with like-minded people, because the hosts are often the people that are going to be your ideal client. That's one example. I've had another client, a leadership consultant, and he started doing the podcast interviews to promote his book, but he also, through connecting with people in the leadership sphere, he had consulting work. He's, offered to do webinars, speaking opportunities, all those things, again, through connecting, or people have heard him on podcasts. And yes, so I think it's so effective. People will often ask you, the first thing they'll say is like, how big is the podcast? But actually that's kind of overlooking so many of the benefits that you get, because that networking side is huge. There's the SEO benefits of going on lots of podcasts, and then they link to your website in the show notes or from the podcast hosting platform, those kind of things. So you're building your backlinks. You're building that authority too with the podcast interviews, because unlike with a Facebook post or something, that's a bit more fast moving, it's more like it's an asset, like a YouTube video. So you do your interviews, but people can find you months later, years later, and then they can click on that interview, and then they can hear you talking, and they can make that connection with you, and they can become your client or want to join your community. So it's something that builds. I would say consistency is quite important with it. Don't just do 2 or 3. It's something you need to kind of work into your overall marketing.
Jenny has a couple comments. She says, I've been a guest a couple of times on podcasts and lives with you guys, but thinking a bit more strategically this time. And then I think what Tim just put up, I hadn't even thought about the SEO stuff, but of course that'll help. That's something that we forget about, but it's so important to grasp what SEO. Will you explain what SEO is and why that's so important?
Yes, so it stands for search engine optimization. So these links are going to be really helpful for Google. They're sending to a link, and then they're going to send the traffic through, and it's kind of like a popularity thing for Google. It's going to show Google that people are interested in your site. It's going to note the click-throughs that are coming through, and it's going to make you show up more in the search results as you're building more backlinks. So think if you did 50 interviews, for example, over a period of time, but how many links is that going to be? It's going to be at least 1 per show, probably more. A lot of hosts will share their shows on social media. So you're going to get all these visitors coming to your site, which is going to just improve the popularity of it and where it's ranking.
Yeah. I mean, other thing that's possible is every single time you go on one of these shows, you never know that like suddenly that show might take off later.
That's exactly it. Yes. And people, when you find a show, you often listen to the backlist, don't you? Go, oh, I'm going to go back. And so even if you were interviewed right in the beginning when it was quite small, you're still going to get that exposure. That's something that we try to look at for our clients, is we make sure that the show has sort of 25-ish episodes under its belt before we pitch them, because that's quite a good indicator that they're invested in the show and will keep going. And do they share their show on social media? Do they have a website for the podcast? That kind of thing. Are they invested in it? Are they promoting it? So is it going to grow, and you're going to get the benefits?
Absolutely. And sometimes the smaller shows might have a faithful audience that listens to what they're selling or what they're talking about, and actually does invest in the products and the subject.
Absolutely, because they show up week after week listening to the host, and it's the host they've got the connection with. So you almost get this tacit endorsement as a guest on their show from them, who's somebody they trust and listen to.
Absolutely. I've noticed something, Victoria. Let's go to authors, because this is what I probably have the most experience with, I suppose. Going to authors, I've noticed that sometimes they will do a mass pitch for, does anyone want to have us on your show? And that's even if they have a PR agency. And I found that kind of interesting, that rather than going out and asking individual podcasts or live shows, they're pitching who wants us.
Yes.
What kind of what does that look like? So then we have to pitch back, okay, this is why we're relevant to you. It's like this two-way.
Yeah. Well, how do you feel about getting pitches like that? What?
Well, personally, I'm not a big fan of the kind of like, can I go on a show thing? The problem is that if you reply to it publicly, which you often have to do, then you get a load of other people thinking that they just can appear on the show. And it also is a bit impersonal.
I think it's overlooking what we were talking about, that, it's about networking, making connections with hosts. So growing your community, growing your network, you're kind of overlooking that. Maybe it's treating it a bit more like mass media, which it's not. And it's the thing about podcasts is you're talking to small numbers of people, but that's still really effective. I think it's 50% of podcasts have if you have over 123 downloads in the first 30 days, you're in the top 50% of podcasts. So
it's really
small.
Yeah.
But I suppose when you really think of 123 people, if they're sort of the right people, they're the people that you want to talk to. They're the people, as you were saying, who are showing up and they're invested in the show. That's why it's so effective, rather than, talking to a stadium of people. And how many people in there are actually, interested in what you have to say. And you've also got, you're in someone's ears for sort of 30 minutes. So it really helps build the kind of the know, like, and trust. So that's why I'd kind of favor the personal approach. Also, podcasts have, I don't know how many you get, but shows can get a lot of pitches. So you want to stand out. I know we pitched to Cal Fussman's show, Big Questions. I don't know if you've heard that, but at the time he said, I get 50 a day. Loads. So if you need to, I think as an author, you need to be thinking, right, okay, so how do I make my pitch stand out? How do I make them want me on the show?
I still get pitches for my old show, Begin Self-Publishing, which I haven't done an episode for in about 4 years. And even on that show, I changed the showing format about 6 years ago or something, so it didn't have guests anymore. So it's like, well, shows how much, and people just get the emails off.
You did.
Yeah,
it doesn't make you feel very special, does it?
No. And I do get people. What tends to happen this show is I get other people recommending other people to this show, which is strange.
Okay.
Like, oh, they might be interesting, and it's like, oh, okay.
Yes.
So another comment from Jenny seems to be making up for. I guess the positive about the call out is that those who don't know who the podcast is in the field,
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of the time it is that people just don't know. They don't know podcasts, really.
That's true. So that's, the way I was talking about can be a really good way for, if you're an author or something, to find them. So, because you've probably thought about which genre your book's in and who are similar authors, and to start researching there with what shows those authors have been on. And you get suggestions in iTunes. If you then look those up, you're going to get suggestions of similar shows. There's so many places you can look rather than do that, I think.
Absolutely. So, Victoria, what would be your biggest suggestion for people just starting out, wanting to get on a podcast?
Okay. So I would think about what you want to talk about, think about what your goals are, and think about your call to action. You really want to benefit from this. So what's the outcome that you want? Where do you want people to go to connect with you? Do you have a download maybe? Are you putting out, think of it in terms of the rest of your marketing. And after that, then just start researching the shows that fit that, and get started. I would say get started. Don't delay, because even if you're nervous, the more practice you get, the better you'll get, and you can refine everything as you go along.
Yeah. Anyway, so as we've been talking about it, I would say, what's your CTA? But no, tell us about where people can find you, and where should they go?
Okay, well, people can find me at victoriabennion.com, which luckily you've spelled out on the screen, because I was going to say that's not the easiest. But we have a 30-minute free strategy session. So if anyone wanted to talk about the strategy of being a guest and get some recommendations for shows that they could pitch to themselves, feel free to sign up. It's on our homepage.
Oh, wonderful. I think Tim, do you have her information in the little scan?
Oh yeah, it's on the people scan the QR code that's down there, it will take them to my website, which is basically just a video of this plus your contact details.
Wonderful.
I've never worked out. I should probably put something else there. That's the whole coming back to the whole CTA thing. It's not that I've been doing shows for years, so I really should know how to do them and do CTAs and the like. CTA's call to action if anybody's thinking like, what CTA?
I didn't know what it was.
Did I say that? I'm sorry, that wasn't very helpful.
Oh no, well, you get used to it's like people talking about funnels, and like when you're in marketing to begin with, it's like what's funnel, and then you're like, oh yeah, you start off with a lot of people and then you whittle them down the funnel down to
yes. So another thing you could do is also put together a landing page specifically, and on that page you direct people to. You could have a few things. You could have a download. You could have your affiliate program. You know, your different offers in just one place, so you remember one thing.
Wonderful. And Tim, I have a question for you. What is your T-shirt all about? Be heard.
Oh, this one I got as a freebie from it's the subtitling app. But yeah, I'm not sure even they're still going, but it's a really good T-shirt.
It's a great T-shirt, and I figured it had something to do with maybe podcasting or.
No, I was like, I do miss doing pure audio podcasts, but I've been. One thing that I would say to anybody who is worried about being nervous as a guest, is I went from somebody who was nervous about video or audio, and I did an audio podcast for years. Gradually got comfortable with the audio side, and then with one of the reasons why I was keen to start this show was just to get used to doing video, to get used to doing video shows. And I think right now I'm like, oh yeah, it's just another video, and you get really blasé about it after a while. And I think that you're right. You just need to get those interviews in, and it doesn't really make much difference if it's live or not. Apart from you're going to make mistakes on any show, and they might be as obvious with an edited one, but it's like,
we're real. It's so good to remember we're human and we're real. That's the important thing, and we all make mistakes, and it makes you more relatable, I think.
I think you're right.
But Victoria, thank you so much for being here on our show. It was a great conversation. Jenny said a really interesting discussion. Thank you guys. I know that she's thinking about all of this. So thank you to our guests, our audience, and to you, Victoria. And we will be back next Wednesday to see you all again.
Yep.
Right.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Much.
Bye.
Thanks, Victoria. Bye.
This is terrifying for me.
I've made more money in the last 3 years than I did in the previous 7.
Cliche shit, you know.